Now that the girls are in a place they are skeptical and scared about, let's see what happens. Welcome back, guys, to my channel. Let's listen to chapter 2 of Blossoms of the Savannah. Kindly subscribe, like, comment, and share. Chapter 2. Tayo and Virgian were woken up by a lively chatter of birds in the trees surrounding the house and by the intermittent crowing of roosters. What a contrast to what they were used to in Nakuru. They were always woken up by a rowdy clatter that assailed their ears at dawn. What with the matatu drivers hooting and revving their engines noisily, toads shouting themselves for worse, while incessantly banging the bodyworks of their vehicles. For the first time in their lives, they experienced a rare atmosphere of tranquility and serenity they had never known to exist. Tayo and Leslie got out of bed and sleepily dragged herself to the window. When she opened the shutter, bright morning sunlight suddenly flooded the room. A cool, fresh breeze swept in and caressed her face soothingly. From a distance, she could hear a bustle of activity within the homestead. She could also hear the mooing of cattle and bleating of sheep not far from the homestead. But what captivated her most was the cool natural environment that was created by giant trees that grew between the houses. Wondering what could have interested her sister so much that she kept gazing unblinkingly at a spot outside the house. Rajan, too, stealthily left her bed and joined Taiyo at the window. Standing behind her sister, Rajan noticed features at their uncle's homestead that she had not seen in the previous night when they arrived. Apart from that house in which they had spent the night, three main houses stood within a well-tended and evenly trimmed apple perimeter hedge. She guessed that the four houses belonged to their four aunts, who they were informed the previous night were the wives of their uncle. Between the houses stood smaller buildings that were overshadowed by a massive yellow-tracked acacia trees. Interspersed were olive-green Inorienito trees whose fragrant foliage filled the air with their aromatic scent. Flights of birds flashed between the trees and their air was alive with their constant motion and cheerful calls. Hope our home will look like this, said Persian with enthusiasm. It's so calm and peaceful here. It's the kind of home one would look forward to come back to at the end of the college semester. Children, a woman's voice called from an adjacent room. Come out and have your tea. They quickly dressed up, and within no time, they were out of the house, and one of their aunts was leading them to the next house to join the rest of the family for the morning tea. The three crossed the courtyard, talking happily, the girls walking closely behind their aunt. Like the house they had slept in, the next two houses they walked past were built of heavy cedar slabs, had similar wooden shutters for windows and were roofed with green painted corrugated iron sheets. Standing beside each house, on raised platforms made of strong cedar beams were large black plastic water tanks that collected rainwater from the roofs. Chicken clucked and scratched in the coal shed underneath. Clusters of bushes of olobai with their shiny dark green leaves and tiny yellow flowers scattered the compound. Equilenia climbers flew round the beams that supported the water tanks and climbed over the walls of the houses, making them look cool and comfortable. The last house on the row was next to the main gate through which they had entered the homestead the previous night. It was different from the previous three. It was larger and was built on stone and had glass windows. Unlike the others, its corrugated iron sheets roof was painted green. The front door was ajar, and standing smilingly next to it was a stout woman of 45 or so who greeted the girls affectionately. She eyed them curiously as they responded to the greetings. She introduced herself as Yeyiyo Botor, which meant she was their senior most aunt and the eldest wife of their uncle. They were led to a spacious living room whose large open glass windows faced the east, allowing in spring morning sunlight. The light shone on the young faces, whose wide eyes stared unshamedly at the two young women who Yeyiyo Butura was introducing as their sisters. The 16 or so children aged between 3 and 16 were perched on benches, stools, and chairs around the room, each holding a steaming enamel tea mug on one hand and a slice of bread on the other. Their mothers were there too, and so was Mama Milanoi, who sat placidly admiring the composure of her own daughters. It was only after the children were reassured that their new sisters were not visitors and that they would be seeing them often that Cam returned and they resumed taking their tea and bread. Room was created at the table, and Tayo and Resian sat with their cousins. Seeing that they had the whole morning to themselves after breakfast, Tayo and Resian told their mother they wanted to take a walk around the neighborhood. She allowed them, but cautioned care and wariness of strangers who might take advantage of their unfamiliarity. The girls looked at one another and giggled. They dismissed their mother's misplaced fears as born of the misconception by the old generation that girls were weaklings, incapable of deciding what was right. Their mother watched them as they walked leisurely down the path out of their uncle's homestead. For reasons she did not understand, a pang of a strange premonition twisted her nerves unpleasantly. A creepy feeling kept on gnawing at her conscience regarding her daughter's status of being into Yi and the Mengelana in the midst of a community that cherished girl child circumcision. She, however, dismissed the feeling and relegated it to the back of her mind. What do you make of our Uncle Smiren's home? Virgin asked her sister quietly as they walked down the path. Honestly, I don't think all is well. Beneath the veneer of apparent happiness, I detected some apprehension, a subtle rivalry of some sort between the four houses. What a terrible person you are, my dear sister. Tayo rebuked her sister mildly. You are not worth being a guest in anyone's home. How dare you make such a judgment? Their life seems to suit them perfectly. Easy, easy, big sister, said Virgin teasingly. Don't be so harsh on me. All I have done is to make an observation. Am I not entitled to that? Of course, Tayo agreed and flicked an affectionate smile at her sister. But do you know that the rivalry you detected could simply be a figment of your own fertile imagination? That could be true, Version added, and smiled pleasantly. But can you honestly claim if you're one of the 16 little fellows taking tea from enamel mugs in that crowded room this morning to be content? Perhaps I would be happy, she answered thoughtfully. You know, happiness is relative. One could be happy in a family of 20, and another may fail to find happiness in a family where he or she is an only child. Did you notice that two of our aunts are expectant? Rajan asked mischievously, slanting a look at her sister. At that word, come off it, Tayo said sternly. There are better things to discuss. Parents have the right to have as many children as they desire. You will have that right yourself when your turn comes. Who? Not me, Virgin said vehemently. I don't want to be a parent, at least not in the foreseeable future. I want to study when I'll have obtained my degree. Other peripheral matters such as a husband, children, and such may be considered. They were walking back to the homestead talking animatedly when they were accosted by a tall, heavy-set young man with a thick, dark beard and mustache. He wore a pair of faded jeans and a dirty blue shirt. On his face was a wide, impudent grin. Tayo glanced at the young man and looked away. She moved closer to Rajan and nudged her to change direction. But the man walked directly to Tayo. On seeing the man approaching, a heavy knob carry in his hand, Rajan almost fainted. Please don't harm us, she pleaded. We do not have any money with us. Who told you I want any money? The man jeered as he strode menacingly towards them. Are you not the Intoye de Mengelana from Nakuru town? He asked, laughing contemptuously. I want to have a good look at you and know what kind of stuff you are made of. He roughly grabbed Tayo's arm. Leave my sister alone, Rajan hissed, indignantly lifting her eyes and glaring into his. Let go of her arm at once. Let go of my hand, Taiyo demanded, trembling with anger. We are not the kind of women you have in mind. What women? The man retorted acidly. Soon you will be able to differentiate decent women from Intoyi Yenemegelan. Taiyo tried to wrestle her arm off the man's grip without success, but suddenly he seemed to change his mind. With a sour smile, he spat and glared at the girls. Then released Taiyo's hand. He told them, You have not seen the last of me. Soon you will come to know that there is no place in our society for women of your ilk. He turned and disappeared down the road as suddenly as he had appeared. The two girls sighed heavily and shook their heads as they watched him walk away. Although they had put up brave faces, they were terribly shaken. Thank God his intention was not to rape us, Rajan said, tears streaming down her face. We would have been helpless in the hands of such a brute. Tayo bit her lower lip, struggling to maintain control. His intention could have been worse than rape, she said, tears of anger and indignation welling up in her eyes. They quickened their steps to their uncle's home. True, the incident had taken the sparkle from the day that had begun so joyfully, but they reasoned that it could have been worse. The girls debated as to whether to inform their parents or the ordeal. They knew their mother would understand and empathize with them, but judging from past experience, their father would be less supportive. He would blame them for having dared venture into unknowing territory without his approval. Finally, they decided to keep their incident to themselves. When he finished supervising the offloading of the lorries and arranging of furniture and other personal effects in his new house, Ole Kaelo set out to meet his mentor, Soin Ole Supeo. He was a much older man, possibly 65, a member of the Imolenian clan and a respected elder of Inyangusi Edset. He was known to be shrewd, scrupulous, and honest, attributes that saw him rise from an ordinary Olunguchai who drove his 3 or 4 heads of cattle for hundreds of kilometers to the cattle markets at Dagoretti, to the now immensely rich man that he was. He was reputed to own the largest ranch in Nasila, and his beef herd and sheep were said to be in tens of thousands. His business empire comprised a fleet of buses, lorries, and shops, beside numerous business premises and residential houses that he rented out. As he drove his pickup towards Ole Supeo's farm, Ole Kaelo gave thought to the old woman. When he was in primary school, Ole Supeo was already a famous cattle trader. He would buy cattle from Nasila and drive them all the way to Dagoretti market, where he would sell them and come back laden. In those days, money was still a new concept to many upcoming illiterate traders. He would find it difficult to add up the notes and was forced to arrive at an aggregate of what he actually owned. Ole Supeo had to fetch Ole Kaelo, and together they would walk deep into the forest where they would find a safe place. He would then remove one of the blankets that he wore at the spread it on the grass, take out his pouch, and from it fish out large bundles of notes and coins. He would ask his friend to count the money while he stood tense, waiting, and would only relax when Ole Kaelo told him that the actual amount and it tallied with the figures he had in mind. They carried out that exercise at least twice a month, and he came to be trusted and depend on Ole Kaelo. The two became close friends, and their friendship developed even as Ole Supeo became a very wealthy businessman and farmer. Ole Kaelo respected him and considered him his mentor. Although Ole Supeo did not attend school, Ole Kaelo thought he was one of those intelligent old men who were able to embrace modern culture, balance it with appropriately, and make it run parallel to the old Nasila culture. He had 6 wives and but 30 children. He had sent all his sons to school, and 2 of them had reached university level. All his daughters were circumcised and married off to prominent elders in Nasila. Ole Kaelo had witnessed Ole Supeo's incense only on one occasion. A certain woman known as Monique Inenkoitoe, the Imakerere, a manager at a certain sheep ranch called Intare Naju, and a known crusader against girl circumcision, had come to persuade him not to circumcise his daughters. But Ole Supeo would never hear none of it. When the crusader insisted on having her way, he got angry and forcibly ejected her out of his homestead, threatening to clobber her. Later, he told Ole Kaelo the woman, whom he referred to as a wasp, was a great threat to the Ma culture. Female circumcision, he said, was not only an honored rite of passage that had been in existence from time immemorial, but an important practice that tamed an otherwise wild gender, like cattle that required to be dehorned to reduce accidental injuries to each other. A certain measure of docility was also necessary to keep more than one wife in one homestead. And Ole Kaelo agreed with him, recalling the adage that 2 women in one homestead were 2 potent pots of poison. Ole Supeo's homesteads, sheep pens, and cattle enclosures were at the center of an expensive farm that extended for many kilometers in all directions. Ole Kaelo first glimpsed at the glimmer of the corrugated iron sheets rooftops from the top of a low hill some 10 kilometers away. The manyantas that long ago used to dot the area among scrubby trees and bush had given way to modern sprawling buildings. The trees had been cut down and the bush cleared so that in one direction the land was now an expansive plain of thick, rich grass that stretched as far as the eyes could see, while towards the other direction thousands of acres of wheat and barley lay. Ole Kayelo arrived at the homestead and parked his pickup outside the gate. Looking at the modern homestead, he appreciated how far his friend had traveled from being a simple cattle trader to the wealthy man who owned that massive homestead, accommodating 8 large houses. The first wife's house was the largest and was built among the tall Iloingar trees. He walked towards the gate thinking of the man he continually drew his inspiration from. He had therefore considered it opportune to make his home the first port of call before he put his hand to the plow. Ole Supeo came out of the house to welcome his friend. He had only woken from his siesta, and his eyes were still smarting from sleep. As he walked down the steps in front of the house, he lifted a corner of his shirt and scratched his belly, while his other hand stroked the stubble of his chin. "Come in, my brother," Super said happily. "Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come right inside." They shook hands warmly, and Ole Kaelo was led into the spacious living room. As they talked casually over a cup of tea, Supayo glanced furtively at his friend, his black eyes gleaming in the afternoon sunshine. He certainly liked him, he told himself quietly, and he would have liked him to succeed in the business he had set himself to do. He, however, considered Ole Kailo a bore and sometimes a pompous one, although he did not doubt his intelligence. Little did he know that his friend was much more advanced when it came to the murky business of the underworld. "I hope all is well with your business arrangements," Supayo commented nonchalantly. "Everything is moving on smoothly," said Ole Kailo contentedly. "I hope to open the doors of the shop at the onset of the rains." "Good," said Supayo cheerfully. "You will soon find out that, unlike in agribusiness, where somebody else provides the finances, another does the books, yet another runs up and down making sales, you will have to carry all those tasks single-handedly, and sales will be the most challenging." Ole Kailo's pride was wounded. How could the old fellow think he was so naive as not to know how to organize his sales? Perhaps, he thought sourly, his clansmate had not known that in his earlier years in agribusiness he had been sent out to open sales depots in remote places, which he quickly developed into expanding profitable modern branches. Maybe it was time he showed the aging businessman that younger bulls were raring to go and the old ones would better start skirting the pastures. He threw caution to the wind. "The sales are already taken care of," Ole Kailo said pompously. "Sales of about 300,000 bags of fertilizer, 500,000 bags of seed plus insecticides, fungicides and herbicides are as good as backed and secured. You see that? My goodness, Super exclaimed. How did you manage such a feat? I'm about to sign a 4-year contract to supply all government institutions in Nasila with agricultural inputs, Kaelo said confidently. Once he had spoken those words, Ole Kaelo felt guilty. Ever since he began negotiating for the supply of inputs, he had told no one of the deal. It was a secret that he kept closer to his heart. It had already cost him a fortune, but if the deal went through, he thought apprehensively, it would make all the difference. He now felt rueful. It was as though by speaking about it, he had broken the spell that would have brought the good fortune. He grew anxious, leaned back on his seat, crossed his legs, trying to firmly suppress his own distaste for corruption that was entrenched in those contract giving officers. He had long realized that the choice was between remaining a nobody, self-righteously and accepting sensibly that the man with the meat was also the same man with the knife. However, wanted to eat the meat, must of necessity dance to the music of the man who held the two. My brother Ole Kaelo, Supeo called amidst malicious laughter that had a touch of friendly mockery. Tell me, who have you been corrupting? Nobody really, Kaelo answered angrily, his teeth set on edge. I only made contact with He hesitated, then gaining his composure continued. I made contact with a man called Oloisudori. I met the man in Nakuru. Do you know Oloisudori? Interrupted Tupeo sharply. Do you really know what you have gotten yourself into? Taba! He leaned forward, elbow on the table, his eyes growing into sudden sharp middle points of interest. He remained so for a moment, then sank back into his chair, smiling mirthlessly. My dear brother, here in Nasila, everyone knows anyone who is corrupt. And Oloisudori is probably the most corrupt of them all. What a head start. I'll be glad to share some of those contracts should you run out of supplies. They are quite a bite, I dare say. The mockery did not escape Ole Kaelo, but to hear the man he had all along considered to be his mentor pour cold water on what he regarded as his grand entry into big business was not only frightening but disconcerting. He wondered whether his friend was not being hypocritical. He could be one of those selfish people who, after crossing a river, would destroy the bridge so that others did not use it. He lifted his eyes to look at his friend and shifted in his seat earnestly. In your opinion, he said and hesitated, quite embarrassed. Then he continued, do you think Oloisudor will deliver what he promised? Supel shrugged his shoulders. My brother, you are not naive, nor are you new in business. He said candidly, Olaisudori is in business and wants to continue being in business. If you have fulfilled your part, he will do his, especially if it suits him. So, he is a man of integrity, asked Ole Kailo, a flicker of hope rising in his heart. A man of integrity indeed, Supayo said, a scornful smile twisting his lips. Don't trust him any further than you would a hyena in your homestead. Then lowering his voice as if he was letting him into a guarded secret, he whispered mischievously, and my friend, keep the fellow away from your daughters. He has a reputation that would rival that of a randy he got. With that advice, Olekailo left his friend. Though feeling discomfited, he was nonetheless the wiser, or so he thought. In the afternoon, the Kailo family left Simire's homestead to be driven the 1 kilometer distance to their new home. They rode almost in silence, each wrapped in thoughts they did not care to share with others. Mama Milanoy dazzled by dreams of eventual fulfillment failed to notice that her husband's silence was ominous. She even forgot the premonition that had earlier gnawed her conscience. Tayo had not recovered fully from the traumatic experience they had gone through. The threatening hostility the evil young man displayed had not dissipated, and that the sense of foreboding from the threat was still hanging in the air like the sword of Damocles. Her arm, which the man had wrapped up, still felt unclean. She could still feel the touch of his heavy, collarless hand. She drew in a deep trembling breath and released it in a sigh as she silently sat at the back of the pickup with her sister. Regina also sat there silently. At last they were home, and before them was the solid stone-built red-tiled roofed house that was going to be their home. It was built on a hill that allowed a command of breathtakingly beautiful scene. While his wife and daughters jumped out of the pickup excitedly and crumbled to the gate of their new house jubilantly. Pamisei Ole Kaelo remained behind for a few minutes. Ole's superior sword still knelt at him. Truly, he had known Olaisudori to be a notorious criminal, but was not everybody doing business with him? Was he really that bad? He wondered. Or was it the usual business rivalry and envy? Try as he did to justify his business deal with Olaisudori, something inside him told him it was not right. He thought an old man of Ole superior seniority did not use the word taba lightly. Thank you guys for listening to chapter 2. I hope to see you again in chapter 3 soon. Kindly subscribe, like, share, and comment, and tell me what you have learned or what you see in chapter 2. Thank you. I love you.